All right, so I'm recording this video to basically go over how to debug a Java program. So some of you already have the skill of debugging a Java program using an editor like Eclipse or NetBeans or whatever Java editor you have. So if you have those skills, you know how to set a breakpoint, go to that code, inspect the value of the variable, and then figure out what's wrong with the program. Why is it not working? Then this video, if you know all these things, this video is not for you. All right, so I will start with, I'll start with debugging, how to debug a program. So I will show you a sample program and I'll run it in a debug mode. And Eclipse provides you the facility to do debugging. Okay, so let's go over that. Alrighty. Okay. So I'm basically showing you one of the homework problem, diagram problem 1, where you're supposed to write level by level traversal. In my next video, I will provide you a hint as well when I do caching. But in this video, I'll just limit myself to show what and how debugging works. And this is helpful if you have never done debugging before and have relied upon printf statements, like print statements, to do debugging. Okay, all right, so I will just see how breadth first search works. So in this program, there is a tiny graph.txt which you'll find, and that has some vertex information. Let's see, yeah, tiny g.txt, and it's already open, so it has 13 vertices. So this graph will be red, and we want to do DFS on it. So we basically want to debug this BFS method. So, and here the purpose is to understand. So the first thing that you have to understand is the notion of putting a breakpoint. So you see how I'm moving my mouse or cursor, and if you double click it using your mouse, then a debug point arises. You can see it also says breakpoint. Okay, that's another name for point where you want the executions to stop so that you can inspect the values. Okay, so I put my breakpoint here. If my main method calls BFS, then I expect that the control will stop here in debug mode. Okay, so let's debug it. So this is the sign you see, debug. This is a bug, so you basically press it. So my program is running and the control basically stopped here. So now I would like to see, what are the value of the variable. So if I hover my mouse over a given variable, like I see a 5, right? So source is 5. That means this DFS is being instantiated from the 5th vertex. Okay. So the 5th vertex is, let's see, 5th vertex is connected to 4. Vertex 4, 5th vertex is connected to 3. And it's also 0 is connected to 5. Okay. But 5 I see connected to 2 vertices. So am I getting that right? Let's see. So I DQ, so I would expect that to be 5 because that's what I insert into the queue. So that's right. And Q has worked. So that's why DQ gives me 5. Now I would like to see what is the adjacency list for this vertex. So I will then go to the next line. So going to the next line can be done in 2 ways. So you click on run and then you can do step over. Okay, so step over means go to the next line. If you don't want to click this menu item, then you can also press F6. So there is a shortcut for all these. So function key and then 6. So I'll do that, function key and F6, and I go to the next line. So I see that it has actually moved to the second W here. So that did not work. I wanted the control to come inside, so I'll put a breakpoint here. Okay, so that way, when I do F6 again, the control will come to the next line. All right, so let me take a look at what the value V is. It's still 5. So let me do F6 again. Okay, so it came to the next breakpoint, right? So any line of code that is of interest, you would put a breakpoint there and then do F6, or do click this button, step over F6, right? So you go to that next line. All right, now I can see what is the adjacency for V. So it does not show me, it does show me 5. So I would like to see what is the adjacency information. So I'm looking, is there any inspect button here? Yeah, there is an inspect button. Okay, I clicked on that inspect button and I'm interested in 5. So what are the vertices that 5 is connected to? And this is telling me that 5 is connected to 4, and this is like a linked list. So the next item is 3. So 5 is connected to 2 adjacent vertices, and that's 5 and 3. I mean 4 and 3. So that's what we also saw from here, that 5 is connected to 4 and 5 is connected to 3. So adjacency list has been formed correctly, right? So we're just verifying and learning how to see the values of the variables. And if you do F6, it will go to the next line. And if you do F6, the green part is basically showing you what is currently active. When you press F6, then that line of code would have executed. Okay, so if you press F6, this would execute. So then in the next iteration, what was the value of V? Oh, V is still 5, but W is changing. So let's see what was W. So 3. So what this line of code is doing is going over the contents of that linked list, right? So it had 4 and 3, so we processed 4, and now it's the turn for 3. So you do F6, 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 and that's how you move. Now it had gone through both, so now again it will check what does the queue has. And while debugging, if your program is not working, you have to see what are the status of the variables, like linked list or queue. So you want to check. So let's see, what does the queue contain at this point. So queue contains 4, 3, and this makes sense because 5, adjacency list was 4 and 3. So 5 got dequeued and 4 and 3 are in the linked list. I mean in the queue. Okay. So that's how you debug F6, F6, F6. This one holds for 2 times because there are two things that get executed. One, the adjacency list, and then W. All right, so this is the basic information about debugging, right? So these debug points can also be removed. So if you double click on these lines, it will get removed also. Now let's say you want to put a breakpoint here. You could do that by double clicking on the side. And then when you do F6, it goes to the next line. But if you want to directly jump to the next breakpoint, then you have resume. So you have to do F8. So F8 basically means that it will go from one breakpoint to another. So F8. Okay, it went to the next breakpoint. So that's how F8 works. What's the next vertex? That is 3. And you can go over the code and see what's going on. If there is a problem in the code, then inspecting the value of the variable as the code is executing will give you hints on what could have possibly gone wrong. And that's how you will be able to change your code and then again debug, right? So once you're done debugging, you can just click on that red button and it stops. So hopefully, this helped you to debug your code. Yeah, debugging is actually very clean way to find out if the program has any bugs or not, or find out, what is the problem with the code. Printf or system.out.println does the same thing, but it's a little bit messy because you have to put print statements in many different places, right? This is much cleaner way to debug code. And I basically introduced this debugging technique because implementing level by level traversal is a little bit tricky. I will give you ideas about that in the next video. Um, but debugging would be handy as you implement it. All right, so I'll stop here for debugging. If you have any question, let me know. I mean, if you don't want to email me, you can just leave a question in the the Teams meeting, and I can see those questions. So it could actually work like a discussion forum as well. This Teams is pretty useful. It lets you do a lot of things. So I believe this much debugging is enough to make some progress. And there's much more to debugging than what I just covered. And if you're interested, you could look at, YouTube video how to debug Java code, and you can see a lot more detail. So the thing that I actually did with double click on the side, the same thing could be actually done with toggle breakpoint also. For example, if my control is here and I basically do toggle breakpoint, then I believe it will put a breakpoint here, and it did. Okay, so that's another way. If the double click is not working for you, then just select the line where you want the breakpoint to be, click on that line, and then just click on run and toggle breakpoint, and it can remove it also. So if you no longer need a breakpoint here, then you just do toggle, so it goes away. Okay, pretty handy. All right, I'll stop recording here, and I'll create another recording for a hint and going over tracing, not tracing, caching. Okay.